I like that artwork behind you. Very cool.
That's quite a story behind that art, actually. I was commissioned to make a piece of art for George Harrison. He was doing a recording studio in LA called RATS, RATS, which was Rehearsal and Tape Studio. And he wanted a sort of tapestry painting to go in the lobby. So he gave me a little postage stamp from India and said, "Can you do that? Big enough to go behind the reception desk." I said, "Sure, yeah." Painted it. He loved it, paid me. And that was the last I heard of it. So about 2 years later, I went to a party in Laurel Canyon in LA, and it was hanging in the living room. And I was like, what the hell? So I found out who the host of the party was, right? And I said, "What's going on? What's the painting you're doing in your living room?" And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I painted it. I painted it for George. How did you get hold of it?" He went, "Oh man, I didn't mean anything wrong." He said, "But what happened was we found out that George got a bit paranoid about having a public studio and he decided to cancel it. So all the workers, all the construction workers, the joiners, the painters grabbed whatever they could grab, right? And he got that, but he gave it back to me. He said, "Well, it's yours. Here, take it."
I really enjoyed your film.
Oh, thank you.
And when you got to the part of your garden, that really resonated with me because during COVID, I was in my house, right, in isolation, and I started a garden. And I remember going out into the garden and I would plant seeds and I did all these California native plants.
Yeah.
And what I learned is that I had to be really patient because the seeds would grow up and I would think they were a weed and I would pull them out, which leads me to this whole metaphor of you and your garden.
Right.
Because you do this thing where you look at weeds and you say, well, to effect, what makes a weed and
Right.
what makes a flower? They're still God's creations,
Yeah.
right?
Right. What makes this
And
good and that bad?
yeah, because sometimes I look at these things and I go, they flower, but
Yeah.
they're weeds. And do you ever see yourself and as the garden as a metaphor for your life?
Yeah. Uh, because like I say in the film, I was never into it. I mean, I know people that were into gardening. My dad was a big gardener, right? But I wasn't interested in it. I mean, I like flowers and all that sort of thing, but it never appealed to me, right? And then I moved into the space that's my studio, and there's this piece of land on the end that was just blank. There was nothing there. And there's a friend of mine who's local here. He's really into plants, and so he said, "I'll give you some succulents. They're real easy to plant. They take real easy. You don't have to care for them, so on and so on, right?" So I did that, and like you, I mean, I just planted them, and then I would like watch, and I go, "Wow, this is magic." I never really thought about it. And I get to know each individual plant, have a relationship with it. And then, of course, like you say, pulling weeds. I mean, why do I pull these weeds and leave these other things? I've let my garden just go now. I've let the grass grow and the weeds grow. I'm just trying to see what happens.
Mhm.
And it's like, instead of being like a peaceful little garden, it's like a war zone. All the plants are fighting with each other.
Well, there's also the notion that some people are perceived as weeds and others are flowers.
Right. Right.
And we see that now in terms of it's let's attack one class of people
Yeah.
because they're different than us.
Yeah.
And let's pull them out because they are weeds. Yeah.
True.
I knew I was going to like your film from the very opening scene when I saw Paramahansa Yogananda's book,
Yeah.
Autobiography of a Yogi.
Uh-huh.
I used to go over to the lake shrine.
Oh, really?
Oh, God, I was having a really challenging part of my life. And I remember going to the service they had there, and they do that little meditation where this guy plays a harmonium or something. And all of a sudden I heard this voice in my head. It said, when? And I go, what? When? It was like, when are you going to stop? And I thought, oh, that's interesting. It's like, when are you going to make this change and stop? What was that like when you discovered his writing?
Well, I tell the story in the film about I read the book and I was really taken by it. But then I found out he died in 52, right? So I was bummed out. It was like, shit, I want a guru I can talk to, you know. You see the story in the film. I go through the whole process. I tried Hare Krishna, I tried TM, I tried the Buddhist thing, I tried all these different things, and none of them took until I met Sri Chinmoy, who I met through Santana, right? And he was a spiritual sort of giant. He used to do things in the physical world to show that you could do anything with the spirit. He'd lift Volkswagens and stuff like that, right? He was also a painter. So I asked him to put a piece of art in my billboard art show. And he said yes, and he did a piece for us. It was beautiful. He came from New York to the opening. And I said to him, I can't tell you how great it is to meet my guru. And he said, I'm not your guru. And I said, what do you mean? You're an artist like me and blah, blah, blah. He said, no, I'm not your guru. I said, well, do you know who is? And he said, yeah. I went, oh, fantastic. Tell me who it is, right? He said, well, I can't do that. You have to find him yourself. And you already have, but you don't realize it. So I'm like, what is this big puzzle thing going on? You know, tell me. So I said, well, let me ask you this. Can you give me a clue? And he said, yeah, your guru isn't in the body. And as soon as he said that, I realized it was Yogananda. And he said to me, you know, you were hung up on the physical presence. He can help you more now because he's not in the body and you can communicate spiritually. And that was a big eye opener for me. And I really tuned into that. And I started to serve him. I'm an usher now. I've been at the usher at the Straight Lake Shrine for quite some time. And it's an eye opener, you know, that communication. And like you got the whisper when
Mm-hmm.
I get,
Yeah. I thought, am I going crazy?
no, you got to be open to that.
You talk about this notion that artists are perceived as dangerous, weird, antisocial, and in some ways, they're nonconformists.
Mhm.
I'm the real artist, unless you're a good friend, Thomas Kincaid. Maybe that's a different story. But I love that scene where you go home and your father has none of your work, but
Right.
you look on the ceiling, there's Thomas Kincaid.
Oh, it was worse than that. It was over his bed. He slept with this thing over his head every night, right? It was like one of those three plate things, you know, triptych plates from what is it called?
Oh, the Hallmark. Oh,
Franklin Mint.
Franklin Mint. Yeah, Franklin Mint.
Yes, yes.
You talk in the film about we're constantly trying to explain ourselves and who we are. And then there comes that time when some of us say, uh, I'm not going to do that anymore. When did that, should we call it an epiphany, happen for you where you said, I don't need to explain myself?
It was twofold actually. I had that realization myself when I was quite young in my teens. I realized, well, I'm different to all these other kids. We're not interested in the same kind of things. They've got very different interests to me, and I'm not going to bother explaining it. But Yogananda also says, teach by example. Just by the way you live your life, people will watch you and they'll say, what's your deal? What's going on with you? You're different. I've had that happen a lot to me, right? People that know me, they've said, you know, you've really changed in the last year. What have you been doing? And I look at them and I say, well, I've been meditating. And they don't really get it. You know, they kind of go, yeah, okay. And what else? And I say, no, that's what I've been doing. And I don't think, no matter how articulate you are, you can never really explain your own personal experience, you know? You can explain some of it and they get bits of it, but they don't get the whole picture. It's good because I hang out with a lot of Yogananda followers, and of course, we all have that common thing, you know, so that helps you understand each other.
Tell me about what inspired you to start painting automobiles.
Well, it was London 67, you know, London 67, like everybody else, was like the summer of love, you know, everybody was painting everything and doing all this stuff, right? We had a house, three-story house in Chelsea in London, and we'd painted the outside of it. And this French news agency called Pathé, they came to me and they said, look, if we gave you a car, would you paint it for us and we'll film you? just to show it's one of the activities going on in swinging in London, right? So I said, sure, I get a car out of it, fine. So that was the first one I did. I've done several cars. I enjoy it. It's a nice three-dimensional thing. And going out on the road, I get all kinds of comments about my truck. In fact, I had a guy last week. This is mind-blowing, right? I was at the post office and this guy comes by in a white Rolls Royce and he stops and he goes, I want to tell you, I just love your car, man. And I thought, this is a guy in a Rolls Royce. I said, well, I like yours as well. You want to swap? Yeah, it's fun. Taking a 3D thing is very different to just regular painting because you've got to think of it from all angles. It's fun.
Tell me about the first time you met Trisha.
Ooh, the first time I met Trisha, I don't think I can remember an actual first time.
But had she always been there? You knew her and she'd always been there. And then tell me about that. Tell me about the,
Well, once again, in the 60s, right? It wasn't unusual for me to wear, frilly shirts, earrings, eye makeup, uh, velvet pants, maybe high heels or, boots with heels on them, right? Wasn't at all unusual. And in London, several of my girlfriends would give, I'd be staying with a girlfriend and I'd say, hey, I really like your shirt, babe. Oh, you can have it. Here, take it. So it wasn't like a overnight thing. It was a gradual process. And I just got used to that. I mean, I'm just used to it now. My wardrobe is very interesting because I used to have two wardrobes. I used to have Paul's wardrobe and Trisha's wardrobe. Now it's completely blended. And if I'm going somewhere, I just pick an article of clothing and it works either way. And if I do full blown Trisha, then obviously I do the skirt and heels and whatever, right? But my clothes I mean, I'm wearing a pretty flamboyant shirt right now, right?
but it makes sense because in the 60s, you were, I don't know so much hanging out with the rock stars, but Genesis. And then when you were telling that story, I think of Mick Jagger and,
Yeah.
David Bowie. They all wore costumes, and there was that notion of androgynism and all that stuff.
They called it gender bending. Remember that? It was back then, yeah. So it's interesting how I got my name. I mean, as I mentioned in the film, I would do stuff with my wife. I'd dress up and play stuff in the bedroom, right? And one night we were playing around and she said to me, you know what? You're not Paul, you're Trisha. So I said, oh, really? She'd identified something in me, right? She said, yeah, you're a Trisha. And I went, yeah, okay. I just accepted that. That was my name. So that was actually the birth of Trisha, I guess, right? Then I sort of got comfortable with it and I played around and got more adventurous. And I wanted to go out, obviously, right? I wanted to go out in public. She wasn't into that at all. She thought it was very dangerous. I'd get stopped by the police and what if the neighbors saw me and all that stuff. And I didn't care. I was like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I mean, I'm going to go out. And I got very into like going to the library and looking at all the psychological books, because I realized it was unusual behavior. I recognized that, right? And then I found the word transvestite. Several artists that I read about were transvestites. So I went, oh, I better look into this. So I go to the library and I start investigating and I find all these isms. Gender dysphoria was the big one. I'd read these saying, oh, I must be gender dysphoric. But I'd read the psychological profile and it wasn't me. Some of it was me, but it wasn't all me. And I go, well, I'm not really one of those either. And it was like an interesting quest, to find out what am I? And it wasn't until recently I discovered what I am. Okay, there's a new term for it.
I remember seeing a film about Tennessee Williams,
Uh-huh.
and there used to be a law against costuming. You could not go out dressed in drag.
Oh yeah, it was illegal. I remember going to Las Vegas and I was told, don't go out in drag because it's not legal. It wasn't legal then in the 70s, right? Yeah. It's funny how, in a way, I feel like the world has caught up with me. Because I knew I wasn't a transvestite. I knew I wasn't a transsexual. I ticked off all these things that I wasn't, right? And then I read the phrase transgender. I went, oh, that's nice. Yeah, that works. Okay, I'm transgender. And I have my little category, right? So that's what I am.
It's interesting how, in some ways, trans people have become the accursed group. I mean, you've got in the film, Marjorie Taylor Greene is talking about that they're horrible monsters, and
He talks about trans terrorists.
yeah, trans terrorists.
I mean, what the?
So
It's
could you
so
imagine you're sitting there, all these trans people come up and they want to do my makeup?
right. They're going to terrorize you with lipstick.
Well, I thought it was really interesting when you were showing how you put on how Trisha puts on her face. And I thought of this notion that the skin is like the canvas and the makeup is the paint. It's creating this image.
Interesting thing is, I've had women come up to me, right? I'd be in an art gallery opening or a party or something, and women would come up to me and they go, they'd be looking at me, right? Like, and I say, yeah, can I help you? Oh, I'm just checking out your makeup. How you do that? I mean, that's really, and I just, well, I'm an artist, so my face does become the canvas and I experiment with different looks and so on, right? I've learned quite a bit from drag queens. They give you great tips. And it really is an interesting canvas to play with. And I don't remember in the film where I tape my
The
face.
tape, yeah, to pull your face back.
So many women have said to me, "Oh, I saw that in your film. I do that now, a cheap facelift."
Uh, your film is profound in the sense that what you say, and you say some pretty thoughtful things. And I like when you were doing you got into what is it, Tibetan sand painting,
Yeah, yeah.
where they do this painting and then they destroy it.
Hmm.
And you say in the film you were waiting for the opportunity. That must have been interesting for you to make a thing of art, of beauty, and then destroy it and throw it in the ocean. What was that on a deeper level for you? Did it take a while for you to let that go?
Um, was several things led me to that actually. Uh, Being a painter, I have a lot of stuff. I think you probably have maybe a 70% success rate, whether things work or don't work, right? So all the other stuff goes into a storage space. So I've got tons of paintings in a storage space, right? So that's something that's established, right? I can recycle them, I can reuse them or whatever, right? And at the same time that all this was going on, I was reading in the Bhagavad Gita and the holy Hindu scriptures about impermanence, non-attachment to your work. There's a whole thing in there that says you don't want to be attached to your work. You should do your work for God and give it to God, and that way there's no karma attached to it. And I'm going, well, that's okay, but I mean, we live in a capitalist society. If I'm going to work, I want to get paid for it. It's an obvious thing, right? And it was kind of a conflict I had with myself. Then I saw the Tibetan painters, and I went, that's the way to do it, right? So the idea of creating with a positive purpose in mind for your creator and giving it to him and then saying, you decide what the reward is for this. I'm not going to decide. You decide, right? Was a very big step for me to take. The first time I did it, I did the sand painting. I kept it in my studio for about a day. Then I destroyed it and threw it into the river nearby, right? And so I'm going, well, okay, I'm going to wait for the reward. What is the universe going to give to me, right? About 3 or 4 days later, something came into my life was a real blessing. It was something I didn't know I needed, something I never thought to ask for. I'm like, whoa, could that be associated with that? And I didn't make the connection, right? The next time I did it, same thing happened. Something that you could never in a million years imagine that you need in your life, a realization or whatever, right? And so now it's become a game with me. I love doing it. I make the painting, put my heart and soul into it, do with the most positive intention, and then let it go. And it's a great feeling to let your creativity and your piece that you've made go. Otherwise, you're stuck with it. You've got to find a storage space or something to do. I take a photograph of it, and that's all I need. Then I can let it go. It's very, very liberating. And I've had some very funny things with people where I make the sand painting and there it is. I do them at rock and roll festivals sometimes, right? And a guy will come up to me and he'll say, "Oh, I want to take that." I go, "Help yourself. It's all yours. Take it." And it's really, really fragile. You jolt it or bang it, and it's destroyed, right? So I say, "Take it. It's all yours." So they think about it. One guy in particular, I remember, he kept coming back to me. I was at this festival for 3 days. He kept coming back with different solutions. He was going to put, the sticky paper that you put in shelves.
Yeah.
He,
Yeah.
he was he was going to come back with a sheet of that, put it over the sand painting, and that way he'd get to keep it. And I said, "Yeah, but you're only going to get the very top layer of the sand. The sand is probably 3 or 4 layers of sand deep." Oh, okay. So the next day he came back with another solution, and then finally he got it. He went, "Oh, I get it. It's all about destroying it." And I said, "Yeah." The best one I ever did was a guy locally here from Santa Barbara. He came over and he said, "Oh, I love it. Can I have it? Can I take it? Do you want to sell it to me?" I said, "I don't want to sell it, but if you can figure out a way to get it to your house, you can take it." The first problem was it was on a table that was too big to go through the door horizontally, right? I said, "If you can solve that problem, it's yours, right?" So he thought about it, right? He came up with a great idea. He said, "Okay, I'm going to get a circle of glass cut the same size as the tabletop, and I'll put bulldog clips around it." And I said, "What a great idea." He did that, right? He got it out of my studio, got it into the back of his truck, and he got it home in Santa Barbara, right? And he put it on a tabletop in Santa Barbara and took the bulldog clips off the thing, lifted up the glass, and the air went and wiped it out. So I said, then he got it. He went, "Oh, I get it. Yeah, it was meant to be destroyed." I said, "That's the whole point." It's kind of great when people do get it, because it's against everything that we think.
It's like this, this notion of attachment.
Yeah.
We attach things that we think we need, or we have attachment to the illusion and of the perception
Hmm.
that we're silly or stupid or poor or ugly or fat or too skinny. And I, I, I I think that story is awesome because I can see you being very playful with it because and that's the lesson. It's like through art, you learn these life lessons that are there, but you don't really know until again and again, and all of a sudden you stop and think, well, oh, that's why, that's the purpose, so that I don't become too attached to any one thing.
Yeah. And also the act of creating as well is very interesting because when I do these sand paintings, I am the total decider of how perfect it's going to be. I could get really anal about it and get every grain of sand exactly perfect, right? So I get it to a degree of perfection that makes sense to me, right? And that's how it is. I could go on for years on one sand painting until it was absolutely perfect, right? But I enjoy the act of making those decisions as well. It's all part of the creative process. You make this thing, it's different every time. It's a process that it's a meditation in a way. I get really out of myself time goes by very, very quickly. Maybe an hour's gone by and it seems like 5 minutes to me. And I get into the minute little detail of it. And then to let that go, it's amazing. It's like taking the biggest dump in the world.
You feel like you slept for a week. How did you get so philosophical? Philosophical? No, but
Philosophical.
philosophical. Oh, you, it has to be perfect, doesn't it? I can't just, that's the way I say it. No, but
I can only thank Yogananda for that. I hear myself talking about stuff every now, and I think, where did that come from? And it's maybe something I read by him. It's a realization I had. I'm not particularly, I wouldn't call myself philosophical. I'm a thinker.
mhm.
Always been interested because I went on that quest, like I told you. I needed a guru. I knew I needed a guru. That was clear from the very beginning. I went on this quest. And in the course of doing that, you learn what you don't want, which is very important, right? When you find what you do want, you find the teacher that really resonates with you, then you're there. You don't have to listen to anything else. That's it. You've found your guy. Listen to him and dedicate your life to him. And that's it.
Do you think that's why it's important to meditate? Because it clears away all, like you talk in the film about the noise.
Yeah.
It clears that away so we can be open and receptive to these opportunities for learning to come our way.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think I say in the film, it's like we're tuned into three radio stations at once. There's all this noise going on, and you're trying to find your way through this. I'm talking about mental noise now, right?
Right.
Voices inside you. What am I going to know? When you meditate, I don't know, somehow you get a clarity. It's like you tune into a higher radio station. It's like we're living at 98.5 and the spiritual world is 105, FM we're talking about it. That's kind of how it is to me. You tune up to a higher radio station. And I really know that. And Yogananda teaches you how to do that. He teaches you the techniques of how to tap into spirit, how to tap into the real you, the you that is the spirit within you, right? And the thing is, it's so easy. People don't realize how easy it is. They think it should be very complicated and you should wear special clothes and sit in a special chair and all this stuff. No, you just got to sit your butt down and be quiet.
If you could look at your life and where you are today and where you were before, maybe you were less aware, let's say, what would you say to that younger you?
Boy, what a good question. Younger me, well, how young are we talking?
It depends. Think of a time when, those limiting thoughts that you may have had, and you go back to that time, and what could you have said to the younger Paul?
Yeah, yeah. When I was sort of maybe, let's see, about 10 years old, 9, 10 years old, I got a lot of crap from the kids at school because I wasn't into what they were into. And I got quite upset. In fact, my mother took me to like a counselor. There was a school counselor, right? Because she thought I was nuts. My mother thought I was nuts and I needed to get straightened out, right? And I wish I could say to that kid, hey, don't worry, you're okay. Because I didn't know. The,
Mhm.
the shrink actually helped me a lot. The shrink encouraged me to paint more, to be more creative, not to listen to what people said. Just go and do what you want to do. If you enjoy it, do it, as long as it's not hurting anybody. Yeah, so that's what I would say. Don't worry, you're going to be okay.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was fascinating when Trisha paints,
Hmm.
totally different vibe.
Yeah.
Totally different vibe. It's explain that process when she's working. What do you notice about her and that experience?
Well, first of all, Paul's way of working is very complex, right? I do fairly complicated images, usually about an idea, expressing an idea or a concept. And I draw it all out, using perspective and all the tricks of the trade, and then spend quite a bit of time painting it in a sort of semi-realistic style, right? Sometimes a painting will take me 3 months, 3 months. And it's okay, it's fine. Not very good for the neck and the shoulders. I get incredible backache from sitting like this all the time, right? But it's very satisfying. And I've made a very, very good living from doing that. And I felt there was another way of creating. So, of course, one day I asked myself, what kind of art would Trisha make? And it was like a serious question. So, what kind of art do you want to make? And I quickly realized that Trisha wanted to make art that was spontaneous, didn't have any intellectual perspective to it. It was no thought, no goal in mind, just create. So get all the things you need. You need canvas, you need paint, brushes, water, get all the stuff and go. Don't think about what am I going to do today? How's it going to look? Just do it. And I started off wanting to make pieces that didn't look like paintings. I didn't want to see any brush marks or any symbol of the artist's hand. I wanted to be as natural as I could. So I started working with acrylics and water and on a horizontal plane, not vertical, horizontal. When you add water to acrylic paint or watercolor, as you maybe know, it all kind of fuses together and makes these really beautiful blends of color. And I was like, wow, this is nice, right? And I quickly realized that the faster I did it and the less work I did, the better it was. So it's like it's spontaneous, it's quick, and it's done. If I start to mess with it anymore, it's going to look like a painting. And I don't want it to look like a painting.